Yeah, so 70% of people in a recent study in Canada said that they would give up social networking accounts if it wasn't for FOMO. Honestly, I spent so much time debating with myself whether to come off Facebook, and I just can't do it. I can't bring myself to do it, just in case something happens. What will I miss out on? I mean, have any of you considered giving up social media? Is it just me? So lots of nodding. Yeah, and then has anyone actually done it? Yeah. Oh, so brave, so brave. Yeah, I mean, I definitely experienced this kind of fear of missing out thing, the FOMO. So yeah, and that can cause quite a lot of stress. Kind of social anxiety. And this is quite dark. I wasn't sure whether to include this video, but I'm going to anyway. It's the highlight reel, and hopefully you know what I mean by that. So if you've got social media, you know, you've got your news feed, and all you ever see are the highlights of other people's lives. And somehow we kind of forget that, because we're there in our normal life with our highs and lows kind of backstage, and we sort of forget that they've also got those, but we're only seeing the highlights, and we're sort of just comparing those highlights with where we are, with the ups and downs, and inevitably that can make us feel a bit crap. So this is dark, so I do apologise, but I do like it. Sorry, Christina. But yeah, I mean, you sort of get what I'm saying, and I'm sure you will know it anyway, but you know, so we just can't help but compare ourselves to these highlight reels that we see, even though they're massively unrealistic, and we actually know, if we think about it consciously, that, you know, we know it's not real, we know it's not that, but it's very difficult to stop yourself from making those kind of automatic comparisons. So yeah, I guess that's another way of feeling stressed. Another online stressor, and you sort of got this from this next one, social currency. You kind of got that from that video as well, which is, you know, just as pounds are currency and they give value to something, in an online world it's comments and shares and likes, and you know, he was chasing in the video the likes, because the more likes means that, you know, we're in this case we're the product, we're the thing that needs the value, and that's, you know, it can be quite damaging, kind of, trying to chase those likes and letting others assign value to you in that way. So again, that can be quite stressful to manage. And I can't remember, we had some qualitative interviews, not that I did, but one of my colleagues at the Open University did recently, talking about what women share and why in terms of their photos. And a lot of them were sort of saying, you know, they put up these pictures and then if they don't get enough likes, they take them back down again because it's almost like they're not representing themselves well enough. Which again, you know, it's quite tricky to manage that, and they clearly cared a lot about this kind of social currency, about the amount of likes they were getting. They found that quite stressful to keep up with. There was also, you know, one story that one woman had told about a daughter. Her daughter had gone to a dance competition, and it was this sort of really beautiful picture of this girl, little girl on there, having kind of just finished. And she said, you know, she put it up because she was so proud of her and and she said, yeah, but if you'd seen 5 minutes before, she was absolutely in floods of tears and hated the whole thing and and again, sort of just showing that kind of mismatch between how we represent reality and what reality actually is. So yeah, it can be quite stressful to kind of keep up this work. And another obvious one is the online harassment aspect. Most of us have seen it somewhere online, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, whether it's underneath, I mean, the places I see it a lot is underneath newspaper articles where you get comments. And it's just, yeah, I mean, the trolling and the harassment that happens there is just horrid. And yeah, so I find that quite stressful even to just see it. But imagine being one of the sort of 40% who actually experienced it. I mean, how stressful is that as well? With navigating kind of your real life and this online life, where people hide behind this kind of thing of anonymity and they can say anything, and it's, you know, really not good. So, it sounds like I really hate online life and social media and mobile phones. I don't think I can live without my smartphone, and as I've said, I'm really uncomfortable with the idea of coming off Facebook, so I don't hate it. I just think we need to better manage our interactions with these things to sort of help our kind of peace of mind, really. So how can we avoid digital stress? So we can go on a digital detox. At the very least, turn off your notifications when you're sleeping, so you're not kind of interrupted by it, just put it in airplane mode, something like that. Actually, Jim sent me an email earlier. So actually, this month in the BPS, there was a paper that's come out that's actually sort of saying in a psychologist magazine, 5 days off Facebook will improve your stress levels. And they looked at this by measuring cortisol levels in saliva, and they found that after 5 days of taking a mobile phone off somebody, their cortisol levels have dropped, in comparison to somebody who they haven't taken the phone off, or a group of people that haven't taken the phone. So yeah, 5 days without it might seem too much for you. Might seem like a great idea. I'm not sure I can go 5 days myself, but I think even whether it's an hour, whether it's a couple of hours, whether it's a day, whether it's a couple of days, whether it's weeks or months, whatever, if you can have that time to just switch off and actually relax and focus on you, brilliant. That will really help. Setting yourself boundaries. This is I'm seeing this more and more now. I don't know if you guys recognise this as well, but no phones at the dinner table is kind of like a rule in our house now, so that's quite hard, but we kind of stick to it. You could say things like no text messaging between certain times, things like that, just so you're buying yourself that time, that kind of, again, that digital detox time. And also you could say, let's only check emails at a certain time. So I know it's a nightmare trying to get work done. You'll be halfway through something, an email notification comes in, you look at that email, you answer that, an hour later you go back to what you were doing, having completely forgotten where you were, and now you're in a complete stress. So I've actually seen quite a few of my colleagues doing this now. So I'll send them an email and I'll get an auto reply saying, I only check my emails at these times to increase productivity. And to begin with, I thought that was like, oh, that's odd, I've never seen that before. Whereas now I'm like, I think I need to do that. I think I might do that. So yeah, so these are sort of things that you could do potentially to kind of increase productivity and decrease stress. And this is really important. Audit and curate your social media. I think we just kind of, out of politeness or whatever, we sort of follow probably too many people and too many things. But next time you're looking at social media in any way, shape or form, just ask yourself the questions, does this make me feel good? Does this make me feel happy? Or does it make me feel not great? I recently did quite a big cull of things that I was following, and I've hidden things from my timeline. And just be totally honest with yourself. If somebody's kind of posting things that just really don't, you don't like that much, you don't have to necessarily delete them, but you can unhide them. There's ways that you can curate it so you don't see that. The flip side of that is what makes you feel good. Are there celebrities you like? Are there learning things that you like, or just kind of wholesome companies, or grumpy cats, or whatever? Are there things that make you feel good, make you smile? If they are, follow them. Just curated, so you've got a good balance. And use technology to your advantage, and this is kind of what I'm going to talk about now. So there is all this dark side, but there's also this light side to technology. It does give us stuff at our fingertips. We can access much more now than we ever could before. And there are so many apps out there, so many websites that are specifically designed to make you feel better and to make you healthier both in body and mind. Loads of them. And this is just like a little snapshot of some. So you've got lifestyle apps, whether it's to do with running, exercise, like recipes that are good for you. These ones are quite big meditation or relaxation apps. Ones for eating disorders, CBT, just for general mental health, OCD specific, the apps that tell you about local services that can help you, ones for bipolar, PTSD, general community support. Ellie for instance is a new one. I mean, there's loads out there, and you just Google it, or if you look in Google Play, or if you look in the App Store, you'll just find that there's huge amounts of apps that are available that can possibly help you in one way, shape, or form. But how do you know which ones are good? And that's the question, isn't it? Because there are hundreds of them. And there is absolutely no system of accreditation in the UK. So anyone can produce an app, say it's for wellbeing, and that's fine. So they're not necessarily assessed. But the NHS is actually, they've just launched a test library for mental and physical health, where they have got a selection of apps on there. It's beta phase at the moment, but it should go properly live kind of later in the year. UCL are actually, well, a couple of people at UCL are responsible for actually testing or reviewing the literature that tests the efficacy of how good these apps are at improving things like stress, well-being, depression. So you can be fairly confident that the apps that appear there have been tested in some way and are deemed efficacious and good for you. And in future they are talking about actually giving NHS approval to some of these apps. So this is one way in the future you might be able to find something out that might be good for you. Equally, the ADA, and I can't remember what it stands for, American Depression and Anxiety Association, probably. They've also reviewed a bunch of apps, not in the same way as UCL are doing, so not in quite an academically rigorous way, but they have reviewed them for like ease of use and things like that, but also how effective I think they might be. They're quite transparent though in terms of how they've marked them, so you can go onto this website and have a look if you're interested. But you're psychology students, so you can actually find this out yourself, and this is a great thing. So there are questions that you can ask when looking at the different apps. If you see something that looks interesting, like Headspace is a big one, for example, for meditation. You might have heard of Headspace, the app. It's quite a big mindfulness one. But you can ask who made them, and usually on the app home pages and stuff, it will tell you who made them, whether they're likely to have connections to clinical psychologists, whether they're evidence-based, that kind of thing. So you can do a little bit of background research yourself. And have they been assessed by unbiased sources? That's a big question to ask, and I'll come on to these in a second and how you can check that out. And also a big question, how have they actually been assessed? Are they, what methods of assessment are they using to see whether these things work or not? And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. So have they been assessed by unbiased sources? Yeah, look at the research. You guys have access to this, and hopefully through your psychology training, we're training you to be researchers, or have trained you to be researchers. So you can do this. Google Scholar is a fantastic place to start. Put in the name of the app and whatever buzzwords that might be associated with it, and see what comes up. Are there any papers that have been done, academic papers that have reviewed how effective these things are? And usually there are quite a few. So Headspace has been reviewed countless times. And this is a search I did, I think, yesterday, so that there are a few on there. But also you've got access to the Open University Library. So on the Open University Library page, you can look at databases here. So this will take you to specific psychology databases like PsycInfo or Psych articles or Medline, for example. You should have access to all the things that tell you how to use the Open University Library for searching databases and searching for journal articles. If you're not sure, there is a help and support link, which I'll show you in a second. You can also just look directly at journals, and that's just, if you click on that one, you can search again, as I showed you before with the Google Scholar. Search again using buzzwords and the name of the app and see what comes up. You'll get sort of similar types of results by doing that. So this is an example of searching for them directly, and if you want help and support, that link at the top there will show you basically how you can do this using the Open University Library resources. So I searched for my surname and mobile mental health and came up with this paper, which I wrote, and that was quite early on in the use of mobile apps, so that's 2011, and that was looking at a review at the time of what mobile apps were available for mental health, and there weren't many then. Now there's loads. So that's how you can find papers that have investigated them, but you need to ask yourself what methods they've used to evaluate it. So the gold standard would be a randomised controlled trial, and that's really what you're looking for. And this is what an RCT, randomised controlled trial, looks like. Basically, you can't just rely on studies that just take people before they use the intervention and then after they use the app, because people tend to get better with time. So you don't actually know, so progression to the mean, that kind of old theory, you don't know if they're just getting better because time has passed or if they're getting better because of the intervention. So you need to compare them to somebody else, another group that doesn't receive that intervention. So that might be that they just continue as treatment as normal, it might be that they're on a wait list. We don't like wait lists so much because it turns out if you put people on a wait list and they're feeling stressed, anxious or depressed or something like that, they kind of hold their stress, anxiety and depression because they know later they're going to get treatment, so it kind of artificially keeps it at a higher level than it would be in normal circumstances. So wait lists are a bit questionable, but if they give some other kind of treatment or something similar that doesn't include the active ingredient, whatever that active ingredient may be, that's a better comparison. But so gold standard is an RCT really, so if you can find evidence of that for the apps that you're particularly interested in. And looking at the data out there, there's quite a lot, to be honest. There's a lot of studies that have been done on the effectiveness of different apps. And the ones that seem to come out tend to be ones that are either based on mindfulness, they seem to be quite good for sort of for decreasing stress. So that's the kind of, does everyone know what mindfulness is? Yeah, so kind of like meditative interventions. The other big one, and this is huge, is the CBT. So any apps which combine, which look at cognitive behavioural therapy, which kind of look at how you think and also how you behave, because we think, we believe that they kind of interplay, how you think affects how you behave and vice versa. So anything that's based on CBT tends to be pretty efficacious in terms of reducing anxiety and stress. So in terms of, anxiety, this is kind of the typical kind of cycle, like I feel anxious. Your thoughts might be, I can't do this, I'm terrible at this, and then your behaviour might be to avoid that because you're really scared of it, which just reinforces the anxiety and the thoughts that you can't do it. You're never questioning those assumptions, and you're never questioning those feelings. Whereas CBT actually forces you to, first of all, identify those issues, then question them, and then alter your behavioural thoughts in some way. And this is a really, really effective therapy specifically for depression, anxiety, and stress. So once you've found the paper, they've done an RCT, what were the outcomes? So I'm going to talk you through this paper now. It's one of mine. I'm just blowing my own trumpet here basically today, that's what I'm doing. So let's just go back to the beginning. So this is on a specific app that I was involved with the development and evaluation of. So e-health apps are so good for managing stress, anxiety, depression. Like 1 in 6 people experience a common mental health issue, and by that I mean stress, anxiety and depression in any given week, and only about 1/3 of those seek help. So it's a huge amount of people not getting their needs met. And one thing that e-health or apps can do is sort of bring that to those people who aren't necessarily getting that help, so we can make it more accessible. And several pieces of research have suggested that they are efficacious in treatment of depression and anxiety, and the effect sizes of those studies, the effect sizes of using apps or online programs is actually similar to that of a face-to-face therapy. So actually that's quite big, isn't it? I mean, you might not expect that, but that does seem to be coming out again and again in the literature. And 43% of UK people recently said that they'd actually quite like to use a computer, and they'd rather use a computer for mental health issues than going to see their GP. We think that's to do with things like stigma and embarrassment and not knowing actually how to ask for help. the anonymity that an app affords you can really kind of help break down some of those barriers to help seeking behaviour. So I'm just going to talk about My Compass. The program I was involved with is called My Compass. It's based in Australia, so when I lived in Sydney. And yeah, it's a mobile phone and internet-based program, and it was transdiagnostic. It was for mild to moderate stress, anxiety, and depression. And it had a bunch of things in it. It was, at its core, it was CBT-based. It had lots of different modules that could help you break down problems. It could help you tackle and identify and tackle unhelpful feelings and behaviours. It was totally automated, so there was no clinician. So a lot of these do have clinicians at the other end. This one didn't. It was completely automated and completely anonymous. And yeah, it has several other features, like you could track how you were feeling and it would provide you with graphical feedback. And it was developed at the Black Dog Institute, which is a huge institute in the, physically very small but huge in terms of impact, institute that specialises in kind of depression, bipolar, anxiety, several other things now as well. But it's a research kind of led institution that also has clinicians based in it. So you get both the research and the treatment happening side by side, which is really, really nice. You don't see that very often. And this is just like a promotional video.
Welcome to My Compass. Think of it as your personal mental health toolkit. Using evidence-based psychological techniques, My Compass will teach you ways to build a healthy and strong mind. You can use My Compass on any internet-enabled device, including computer, tablet, and mobile phone. Just open the program in a browser window and follow the simple instructions to get started. Registering with My Compass is easy. Answer a few questions about how you are feeling and any problems you are having, and you'll be offered a personalised treatment package. This includes warning signs to look out for and interactive learning activities that teach you ways to make positive changes in your life. If there are any problems you want to keep an eye on, you can track these using your mobile phone or computer. To make it easy to remember, My Compass will send SMS or email reminders when and as often as you like. Graphing and printing your tracking results will help you spot patterns and triggers to thoughts, feelings and behaviours that may be causing you trouble. Choose to work through the activities recommended for you or dip in and out of those that grab your interest. There's 14 learning modules to pick from, so if there's a particular area you want to focus on, My Compass has it covered. Remember, My Compass is not a crisis service. If you are having a really tough time and need some extra support, talk to your doctor or other healthcare provider who can point you in the right direction. My Compass is easy to access, private and available 24/7. And importantly, it works. Research shows that mental health and work and social functioning improved after using the program for just 7 weeks. So why don't you give My Compass a go? The skills and techniques you learn may make the difference between doing life and living it.
Yeah, so that's kind of the promo for the app, or the program, I should say, it's an online program. But just to talk you through what we did, we assessed it using an RCT. And this was in Australia. We had 720 participants. And we measured using standardised scales, so again, like valid, reliable scales. We used something called the DAS, which measures depression, anxiety, stress. So that's the D, A, and the S for the DAS, and then the final S is scales. And the work and social adjustment scale, just to see how much it was impacting on their life as well. So we measured their mood, but also how does this impact your work life, your social life, your everything. So we asked them to baseline these questions. 8 weeks, they used it for 7-8 weeks, and then we asked them again how they felt, and then again we did a follow-up to see whether the changes, if there were any, were sustained over a 20-week period. We want to see if this works in the long term or if it's just working while you're using it. We had an attention control, so this is what I was saying earlier about waitlist control. We had both actually, so the waitlist control doesn't do anything, they're just told that they're going to wait for 8 weeks and then they'll start the intervention. So the reason why we included the attention control was because of the research was quite recent at the time coming out saying that actually you need an attention control that is giving people something, so they're not like, you know, stuck in this kind of limbo, kind of waiting to see, get the proper intervention later. The attention control is to kind of keep their attention whilst you're doing it. So it doesn't have any of the CBT stuff in it. It has, we send them fact sheets basically every week. Just to feel like they were getting something, but it didn't have that CBT aspect or the treatment element to it. And yeah, but the attrition rate was quite high. After the 3-month period, we lost basically half of our participants. That's pretty standard in an online study like this. So yeah, what did we find? So really, kind of the interesting thing is between the My Compass group, which is the blue group, and the attention control group. But you can see what's happening is between baseline and post-intervention for depression scores on the DAS. They are kind of coming down post-intervention after using it for 8 weeks, and then pretty much staying the same. So that difference between baseline for that group and post-intervention is significant. The difference between post-intervention and follow-up isn't. So it's like they're getting better and then they're staying better, basically. It wasn't a significant difference at follow-up to the attention control either. So that's sort of that thing that I was saying earlier. If you just give people time, they do tend to get better. That's this kind of regression to the mean thing. But what you can see is My Compass was making them get better faster in terms of depression. The same was true for anxiety. Same measure. And to a lesser extent, the same was the psychiatry with stress. And again, similarly for the work and social scales, so how much it was impacting their everyday life. Again, it was making them feel better faster. Yeah, so we sort of looked at how much people were using it as well. They logged in on average 14.7 times. That's not a huge amount of time over 8 weeks. So actually the engagement was a bit lower than we expected it to be, yet it was still doing something. And that's not unusual for these kind of things. And they only completed 1.6 modules, we'd expect them to have completed sort of 3 really on average. But again, so it wasn't particularly heavy usage, but it's completely self-directed, so you can choose what modules suit you. So it could be that just one was enough or whatever, so we don't really know that. We need to kind of break that down further. But the point is that using it does seem to make you feel better faster than if you just do stuff and do nothing. So you can use these apps to actually feel better. And while this was in Australia, it is now licensed in the UK as well. It's not called the same thing, and it's got nothing to do with me whatsoever, but it's called My Possible Self. And they've basically taken it and made it straight into an app. They've updated it a bit because we made it in 2012, so it's 2011, so it's a bit of an old intervention. This one came out this year. So yeah, I just thought I'd give you an idea of what my future plans are. So that's my kind of past research and what I've been interested in, and what I want to do now with eHealth. I came back from maternity leave last year in September, and I was absolutely kind of shocked to see how little support there was for new mums and pregnant women who suffer from anxiety and stress in the lead up to childbirth and afterwards. So what I was thinking is, you have a baby, you're not necessarily going to have the time to go out for a face-to-face appointment. There are all kind of other things like stigma and stuff that might stop you from seeking help. So I thought, so I thought that maybe we could bring something like My Compass, not My Compass, but something similar and tailored, for women in this particular area. So we could produce something ground up by asking women what they feel, what they need, and producing something CBT-based with a bit of mindfulness in there for them. So the government have basically made it quite clear that they want to invest more into perinatal mental health because it really isn't recognised, other than postnatal depression, which has a huge amount of information around it, a huge amount of funding. Everything else just is really a big unknown. So I'm quite keen to kind of extend the eHealth research into this area with these people. And yeah, we're currently exploring, we're running focus groups at the moment to see what women want in this area. So that's something I want to look at in the future. But I'm also working on something called sophrology, which you've probably never heard of. Has anyone heard of it? Yeah. Okay. So sophrology is, I had never heard of it either. It's completely new to the UK, really. But it's not that new. So at the same time as mindfulness was coming up in California, sophrology was kind of being defined and explored by Professor Casado in Spain. And they're pretty much coming from the same kind of background. It's basically people who are interested in ways of managing mental health, but not in a medicalised way. So Professor Casado is a neuroscientist. He was treating veterans